Here we are once again, my brothers and sisters, to study the living Word of God, the one that gives us living hope. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. And today we're going to talk about choices. You and I live our lives with choices every day. One of the main choices we have to make in our lives is, do we believe what God said? Is it really true? Or are we going to look at our circumstances and let our faith fail because we're overwhelmed by what things look like without remembering what God has said? Today you're going to see a whole people group, the people of God, the people that walked through the sea on dry ground, the people that were delivered from slavery in Egypt, the people who have been fed manna and quail miraculously through the power of God. Instead of looking at the power of God, they look at their circumstances, and it leads them to their death. But we'll get to that in the next chapter or two. So we start in verse 1 of chapter 13. The Lord said to Moses, again, what do we want to make sure we understand when all these chapters begin? It is actually the Lord talking. This is not something Moses made up or thought about himself. God has commanded it. Send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which, look at this right here. We want you to go to Canaan. Why? Because I'm going to give it to you, right? Which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders. There's a critical point in verse 2. God has promised to give his people this land. We're not just going to go try to take it. We have been promised by God that it is ours. Okay? Hold on to that. That's going to matter. So at the Lord's command, Moses sent them out from the desert of Paran. All of them were leaders of the Israelites. And then verse 4 sets off a chain of similar verses. It says, these are their names from the tribe of Reuben, Shammua, son of Zachar. Okay, so that's for the tribe of Reuben. Let's look at these leaders in sequence. Verse 5, from the tribe of Simeon came Shaphat. From Judah came Caleb. From Issachar came Egal. From Ephraim came Hoshea. From Benjamin, Palti. From Zebulun, Gadiel. From Manasseh, which is a tribe of Joseph, Gadi. Dan sent Amiel. Asher sent Zethur. Naphtali sent Nabi. And Gad sent Guel. Okay, but look at these two guys. All right, we've got Caleb and Hoshea. Hoshea is about to become Joshua. These two guys are going to become notable as this passage moves forward. These are the names of the men Moses sent to explore the land. Moses gave Hoshea, the son of Nun, the name Joshua. All right, he's going to have his own book of the Bible by the time it's over, Joshua. He's training under Moses, and now he's mentioned here in Numbers 13 as they prepare to take the land that God has promised. When Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he said, go up through the Negev and on into the hill country, see what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? In other words, we need some reconnaissance. I want to know what's going on in the land that God has promised us. How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees on it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land. It was the season for the first ripe grapes. All right. So what happens? So they went up and explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as Rehob toward Lebo Hamath. What you need to know about that is they're basically talking about Israel, modern day Israel, in fact, that region. They went up through the Negev and came to Hebron, where Haman, Sheshai, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, lived. Hebron had been built 7 years before Zon in Egypt. Okay, so what happens? They get up there. They reach the valley of Eshcol. They cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. Notice the comparison here. There's a single cluster, but what about the single cluster? It takes two guys to carry a single cluster of grapes on a pole. And we're just being told abundance and fertility is part of the land God has promised. So 2 of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. Okay, that place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut off there. Now here comes something important that you might miss. In verse 25, at the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. You need to hold on to this idea of 40 days because this will be part of God's judgment when their failure is exposed. All right? Verse 26, they came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. So they've been gone almost 6 weeks. Now they're coming back. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. So we have evidence that this land is good. Just like God said, the land of milk and honey. It's a beautiful place. It produces well. There's great land to be cultivated. But there's a problem. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here's the fruit. Okay, so we have proof that one thing God said about it is true. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. Well, what does that mean? Well, they're really big guys. Okay, that's probably the easiest way to say it. Really big guys, maybe giants. All right? So, who knows? These might be the people that Goliath descends from. But okay, in other words, we're intimidated by the power of the people, the cities and how they're fortified, the size of the cities, and we're intimidated by the size of the people. What is happening in verse 28? Our focus is wrong. We're looking at our circumstances. We're not remembering God. We're not remembering what He promised and what He said. All right? Terrible error. Terrible error. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country. And the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan. Okay, watch. Then Caleb. What does he do? He silenced the people before Moses. And what does he say? Hey, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. Okay, these guys have been telling you about how big those people are, how powerful they are, how their cities are fortified. Caleb jumps in. I can't take it anymore. You guys have lost your focus. You need to remember why we're doing this. God told us to do it. What has God told us to do that He hasn't come through? He keeps His promises. He is powerful. He will make a way for us. We can certainly take the land. Let's go. That's Caleb's focus, and that's the right focus. That's the right focus. But, there's always a but. But the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack. We can't attack those people. They're stronger than we are. Oh, yeah, but, once you've lost your focus, once you're going to put yourself in a place of looking at your circumstances instead of looking at what God has promised, then all of a sudden you're overwhelmed. And you're overwhelmed by nothing that would really stop you if you would just trust God. All right? He says, hey, these guys are stronger. Oh, and so now we're going to start the rumor mill. They spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. Oh, man. We can't go up there. They're too strong. We saw Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. In other words, we can't win. We know we can't win. To go do what God said would lead us to certain death. Wow. It doesn't take long to get through this chapter, but I think the lesson is long. You and I, we get to decide how we live our lives and what choices do we make and what do we base our choices on. The majority of the Israelites are basing their choice on the idea that they themselves have to overcome the people of the land, that they don't have the power of God with them, or that God will not respond, or that God's promise is meaningless because he doesn't really come through for us. He's not going to defeat the enemies. He's not going to lead us there. They're focused on circumstance. Maybe you're today looking at your own life and saying, I can't do this, I can't do that, I shouldn't go this way, I shouldn't go that way. Well, maybe you shouldn't, maybe you can't, but the idea seems to be, what has God promised you, and are you going in the direction he's told you to go, regardless of what it looks like? I mean, we see this in our church directly. And since I have a few minutes, let me just explain it to those who are watching that don't know about our church. We've been in a middle school cafeteria for 29 years. We've been holding on because God continues to supply all our needs and keeps us together and keeps us moving forward. And now God has opened the door for us. The answer that God gave came not because we looked at our circumstances. If we had looked at our circumstances, we would have quit 25 years ago. 25, 30, 40 people in a cafeteria, what difference does this church make? We're poor, we're in a bad neighborhood. We could go fill one or maybe two rows in any mega church and just take it easy. Why would we stay together and keep going? Well, because that's where God wanted us to be. And we were doing what God wanted us to do. And what has God responded by doing in our lives? Well, we're in the middle of a $60 million building project. 137 families are going to have homes and affordable housing. We're going to have a sanctuary. Another ministry is going to be helping people train for jobs. Why is all this happening? Because we kept our focus on God and not on our circumstance. I trust you will get the lesson from this chapter. It's so critically important. And as we move forward in the book, we'll see that God is going to bring a severe consequence for this kind of disobedience and this kind of lack of faith. I pray you serve him well today, church. God bless you.
Who is it who for sinners shed his blood, and now for cleansing all can plunge beneath